and welcome to Media MD, the podcast where each fortnight we prescribe each other a piece of media that the other person has somehow missed. I'm Reuben Norhouse.
And I'm Elliot Debo.
And this fortnight we are in a little bit of a pickle, Elliot. We had a bit of a weird situation happen this fortnight, so let's explain it first and then we'll get into what we're talking about today. Well, we're talking about a book called The Warded Man, also known as The Painted Man, outside of the US. So we had a guest come on and talk to us about this, but then he had to pull out at the very last moment. So we've kind of already read the book, both of us, even though we hadn't originally. So we're going to do a little bit of a pitch in case you want to get a kind of spoiler-free version of the discussion. Then we'll go to a break and then we'll come back with our normal part 2. Sound good?
Yes.
I realised that I was kind of talking to the audience and then I addressed you. Anyway, Elliot, why don't we I'll take the role of the pitcher and you can take the role of the receiver for this one, I guess.
Okay, sure.
The Painted Man or The Warded Man is a book set in a world where demons exist, right? It's set in this kind of medieval world where demons exist and they kind of just act like monsters. So there's like stone demons, which are basically just rock golems. And then there's like flame imps and all these different kind of like demons in air quotes. And the main kind of mechanic of this world is that people can draw these little sigils in the ground or paint them onto buildings. They're called wards and they have the power to repel demons, right?
Well, yeah, so it's like they sort of create nets. So you've got to put the wards in specific spots and things so they all line up, and it's really difficult, and so it's very error prone.
Yeah, you have to kind of measure out the correct angles between different wards and all that jazz.
But it's the only thing that I think they have that can stop the demons. Like weapons and stuff don't work on them.
Yeah, so that's kind of the main conceit of the book. It's this world where demons come out every night and they get hurt by the sun. They're kind of vampire-esque in that way. And the only thing that humans can do to kind of stay alive is draw these regular nets of wards to kind of keep themselves safe. Yeah, and so the book kind of has these... It feels very much like Attack on Titan from my perspective. It's very much like humans are kept in this kind of isolated society because, one, you can't travel overnight because the demons will come out, and it's kind of very hard to set up temporary wards. You kind of have to set them up with a building or a structure to be safe at all. Because of this, everywhere is very isolated and communities are very kind of insular, which kind of leads to these themes that are very similar to Attack on Titan, I would say.
Yep.
So should we talk about anything else before we go to the break? A little short first half here.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, so I guess aside from those whole specifics of the world, like the demons and things, it's all it's a fantasy book, and I think it subscribes to a lot of the sort of fantasy tropes, and especially when it comes to characters in the world. So it's if you don't like fantasy books, probably isn't worth it. But it hits a lot of fantasy points. So if that's your thing, that's sort of what you're going to be getting.
Yeah, if that's your thing, go check it out. Now, this is where I would normally pass off to future versions of you and me, Elliot, but because we're already here in the future, we won't do that. And instead, we'll just say, so we're about to be talking about The Painted Man, so if you want to go into it unspoiled, you can pause your podcasting device now, and otherwise, let's continue.
All right,
so it's 2 weeks later. Alright, so let's get stuck into it.
Yeah.
The Painted Man. Elliot, do you want to give us the less than 1 minute plot summary first?
Sure. Okay, so like we said, there's the demons, and then there's this kid called Arlen, and he basically gets mad that everyone is afraid of the demons. So it turns out he's really good at warding, and he uses that to become a prodigy. And then he discovers wards that can hurt the demons, and he figures out if he paints them on himself, he can hurt the demons even more. And so for some reason he uses this to become a hermit who just runs around hanging out with demons and killing them.
Yeah, it's like... No, I'll let you finish before I jump in.
No, that's pretty much it. And then he meets the other two main characters who, in the grand scheme of things, aren't particularly worth mentioning. They're interesting characters, but they don't really serve the worldwide plot at all. And yeah, I mean, that's really where the first one left off. I've actually started the second book.
All right, we'll jump into that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, Arlen's motivation throughout the whole book is, like, humanity should be able to do better, right? That's, like, his whole thing. He kind of gets fed up with humanity because they're just, like, being passive and hiding behind the wards the whole time.
Yeah, so he sort of has that moment where his father lets his mother die, and that's sort of...
Because he's scared to, like, face the demons.
Yeah, it radicalizes him against sort of passiveness and this concept that the greatest weapon that the demons have is the fear that they've instilled in humans, and so he's always trying to fight against that.
Yeah, and it's so bizarre because he kind of... The first quarter of the book is Arlen's origins. The second quarter of the book is him kind of training to become a messenger, which is what they call the people who kind of travel between towns.
Yeah.
And then in the third quarter of the book, he goes to this city called Crozier, which is like a sand desert city. And while he's living there, he finds these wards that will allow him to fight demons, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh shit, I can actually like spread these wards around and help people and like change the whole world because I found these wards that allow you to fight. And he seems like he's being very
heroic.
Heroic, yeah, and self-sacrificing. And even in the second quarter of the book, there's things where he'll like trade wards with people to like build up the general knowledge about everybody's wards that they have, so they get better prepared to fight the demons. Because he does. Whereas a lot of other humans kind of see the demons as a thing that is just a part of life, Arlen sees it as a very much we can do something about this kind of problem.
Yeah.
But then, so he finds the wards and you think, oh fuck, he's going to like travel around giving wards to people and actually making a difference. And then he just kind of tattoos himself and becomes a hermit. It's very weird.
It's like, I guess the reason's meant to be, so the first people he takes it back to are those desert people, which was just,
the Crazians.
It was never really going to work out because they were very racist, basically, and they only like themselves. Very, very xenophobic.
And he found these wards in a like holy burial site. Of their people.
So when he sort of showed them to them, they sort of stole them, kicked him out, and left him for dead. And he managed to survive and remember them.
They didn't steal them. The wards he found were on this ancient spear that was a kind of holy relic for the Crazians. And so they're like, we want our holy spear back. And he's like, no, fuck you. And then they attack him. And they even offer to say to him like, hey, we'll let you copy these wards or whatever.
Yeah.
Just give us our holy spear back. And he's like, no. And at that point I was like, what? I mean, like, maybe he thinks they only work on that one spear or whatever, but that doesn't make sense. Yeah. Arlen, what are you doing, man?
So I like the book, but sort of going from there, I want to talk about probably one of my biggest pet peeves that I had, which is
I should say, I did like the book quite a lot as well.
Yeah.
It just felt like there were a bit of, Anyway, we'll get into what we liked about it later.
So right after he sort of gets left for dead by these people. That's when he sort of gets sort of stuck in the desert. And that's sort of the point where he figures out, now that he's discovered these offensive wards, he discovers that if he paints them on himself, he can like punch demons and stuff, and you know, that does some good results. Yeah. And so then that's when he starts to become obsessed with painting them like over every inch of his body. And that would have been a really cool moment if the book wasn't called The Painted Man.
The Painted Man or The Warded Man.
Because essentially the whole first half of the book, I was just sitting around waiting for Arlen to figure out that putting the wards on people was a solution. And then
and
he does.
I'm looking at the cover right now, and it's like a dude in a hood with wards all over his face.
Exactly. I
know exactly where this is going. Yeah.
And so I mean, it sort of becomes this moment where, as it's happening, it's meant to be like this big oh shit moment in Arlen's head. But as the reader, I was just there, and I was like, oh cool, we're finally doing this.
We're finally at the
nice.
point that the book has promised. Yeah.
So I wish they could have. Well, I wish Peter V. Brett would have called the book something else, and that could have been the big twist, and I reckon that would have been really neat. So, yeah, I just thought that was a shame, because that whole arc then sort of fell flat for me, because then right after that...
Yeah, because you knew where it was going the whole way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even, like, okay, Arlen, I get that defensive wards on your body is a good idea, because then no matter what, you're going to be at least somewhat protected from demons. Good shit. But I still don't think putting the offensive wards on your hands and feet is such a good idea.
Well,
Surely, like, a sword or a spear is still a better weapon.
I thought it was interesting because essentially he was spending a huge chunk of the book looking for the offensive wards, and then he sort of has the first thought to paint them on himself. And so my actual theory was, as I was reading it, that there were no offensive wards. What was offensive is if you put the defensive wards like on your fist, then when you punch them, that pushes the demons away, like the same way that the protective wards act as a barrier. It's just you're hitting them with a barrier. And I guess I actually
But
think...
I don't think that's how it actually turns out.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I think that was better.
Oh, you think it would have been cooler if it had just been that?
Yeah, if it had just been, like, rather than it being these ancient lost wards that he just discovered, it would have been really cool if he'd had that eureka moment where he just changed the way they thought about how they use the current ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so let's talk about what we actually liked about the book.
Yeah.
As opposed to just being negative Nellies.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like, yeah, there were those issues with sort of how Arlen's character arc went for the latter sort of third of the book. But on the other side of the spectrum, I really liked the other sort of most mainest character is this girl called Leisha, who sort of studies to become a witch doctor lady.
Like a herbalist kind of potion maker kind of thing.
Yeah. And she was her whole arc was actually really compelling and interesting, and she was as well. And I always found myself looking forward to the chapters around her.
Yeah, I agree. I think she was the most compelling character. Although it felt weird that her story kind of has... I mean, this is a medieval world, and so Peter V. Brett at times doesn't shy away from the kind of weird sexual nature of the world.
Yeah.
But it feels like in Leisha's case, like there's this one scene, the first time she leaves her town, there's this like paragraph about the guy that she's traveling with, and basically to stop herself getting raped by him, she like constantly gives him this, it like makes him...
Anti-Viagra.
Yeah, anti-Viagra, exactly. So he can't get it up. And so she like craftily avoids being raped because of that. And it's just like... It feels like he's kind of injecting some adult content into it just to do it.
Yeah.
It's a bit weird.
That was very much how I felt when he had all of that sort of stuff as well. Like like there's another scene in Arlen's story early on where you meet a family where the father is essentially constantly raping the oldest daughter who's about 18 or so. And it just sort of felt like he wanted to instill some sort of uncomfortable sexual thing to have an uncomfortable sexual thing. I didn't understand what it added.
Yeah, he wanted to be a bit Game of Thrones, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, we were meant to be talking about the good things about the book.
Yeah,
I quite liked Leisha's story as well. I think she was probably the most interesting character. The other main character that you meet is called Roger, with a J.
Yeah.
It's fantasy world. And he's like a juggler entertainer. And it's very... I quite liked his story as well. I liked his story more than Arlen's, which is weird. I thought Arlen was the least compelling of the main characters.
Yeah, he sort of suffered that thing where, because he was sort of the main character, his plot was always a lot more... Like, he had less of an individual plot because it was a lot more to do with the grand, all the wards and the demons.
And it felt like it was a lot more cliche, or not quite cliched, but... telegraphed. You kind of knew where it was going the whole way through. Yeah,
it reminded me of in season 1 of Sense8, it was the same thing with Will, the cop guy. Like he had a much smaller individual plot because he's more revolved around the grander, the actual sort of plot stuff. Yeah. So the other thing I really liked about it was this setting. I think the setting, it's the same kind of thing I liked about Attack on Titan, which is at the start of Attack on Titan at least, and at the start of The Painted Man or The Warded Man, it's a very cool kind of clustered claustrophobic setting. I really like the idea of these wards that kind of force people to be isolated and to live these very kind of medieval small towns life. I thought it was very interesting. I agree with you, but I actually found myself wanting in that aspect, like, because I agree. At first, as I started to realize that, like, because at first it's Arlen's just in his small isolated town, and then the messenger comes, and that's like a big deal because it's the only way the town hears about what else is happening in the whole world, And you start to think
we should mention
oh, yep.
these messengers are like the people who have trained and have kind of portable ward circles, and they're the people who are willing to kind of take the high risk, high reward job of going from town to town and traveling overnight.
Yeah.
To deliver like mail and do trading routes and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so they're obviously quite well off because of it. And so when that sort of all first happens in Arlen's village, I found myself thinking about all the possibilities of, you could build like a really cool world out of this, because socially things are going to be so different because everyone's so isolated. And in the end, the world actually just ends up feeling a bit like a Settlers of Catan board. Like there's one big city that does farms. There's another big city that has wood because they're in the forest. There's a city on a lake that gives fish to everyone, and they're all just trading like it's a game of Settlers.
It is basically the Settlers of Catan. The sheep town trades sheep for the grain town or whatever.
Yeah, like that's just what ends up happening. And so on the sort of larger scale of that build up of the world, I actually found that really disappointing. It was
I mean, what I liked about it was the small scale part.
Yeah, it was
when it was just Arlen and Leisha and Roger in their small towns and kind of living this life.
When it was just someone by themselves in a town, that was far and away more interesting. I think it could have scaled up better.
Yeah. So should we talk about what's it called? The Desert Spear?
Yeah, so that's the sequel. And as you probably know, because you've read it, Reuben, it's named after this Krazier, the city, the southern city.
This like holy icon, this holy weapon that they have in Krazier.
Yeah, and so basically the plot, I'm not too far into it, but sort of the plot that basically seems to be happening is, the first book leaves off with Arlen teaming up with Leisha and Roger to actually help some people fight demons. And that sort of leads to him just organically growing a cult following because people think he's this promised messiah who's coming to save them from the demons. And so what happens in the second book is essentially the people from the south who left him for dead, they've also weaponized the wards that they more or less stole from him. And they're coming up north to sort of lay claim to all of Thesia. They're sort of like, well, we have the deliverer. So the guy who was Arlen's friend who stole the spear from him is claiming to be this messiah. And
because he also has the power of the kind of offensive wards.
Exactly. And so then it's sort of like, it's become this thing where now that people actually have the ability to fight the demons, they're fighting each other more than ever. Which, is sort of a classic Game of Thrones sort of thing as well. So it's actually setting up this very human war where the Krazians are sort of invading Thesia.
Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Yeah, basically. So then Arlen is sort of having to step up and act as this sort of deliverer to unite the rest of the people against this invading force, while simultaneously trying to convince everyone that actually we should be fighting these demons and not each other.
Yeah, I don't know how much kind of legs this book has for a full series. I mean, I think they set up an interesting kind of premise, but now that the offensive wards exist, it's kind of mutating a lot beyond its original premise.
It is, and it is definitely diverting. Like, so this second book is starting to focus a lot more on wars between people. So I can see how I think it's like the fifth and final book is coming out soon. And so I can sort of see why it could take 5 books if there's going to be all this stuff about human wars mixed in, because that's going to obviously sort of pad the whole thing out. Well, there's also new kinds of demons. The demons are starting to fight back.
Oh, new demons.
A bit more.
Give me one of the new types. Grass demon? I'm just going to try guess. There are already air demons. What are some other elements? Metal demon. Is there a metal demon?
So I honestly, most of what I know about this is actually because I got stuck on wikis.
Nice.
But there's mind demons who are basically, they're the ones, they're mentioned in the first one.
Like mind flayer kind of things.
Yeah, and they can, the most important thing is they can actually see wards and ward nets, so they can direct the other demons on like how to best strike ward nets and stuff. But yeah, so it expands in that way. But
there's also this kind of subplot throughout The Painted Man, which I assume is going to become relevant, of as Arlen kind of fights with these wards that he's tattooed on himself, he kind of turns into a demon. The way the wards work in universe is they siphon power from what they're kind of drawn, or siphon power into what they're drawn on. So when a demon makes contact with a ward, it kind of siphons out this demonic essence and kind of gives it into what it's drawn onto, which in this case is Arlen's body. So he kind of transforms into a demon.
Yeah.
And there's this scene where it becomes the morning, and he's like grappling a demon, and he kind of gets pulled down into the core of the earth where the demons are from.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming in like book 3 or book 4 or whatever, it's going to be like the story of Arlen, like this whole karmic debt that he's accrued kind of coming back to bite him in some way. And I guess I can see where that kind of plot is going and how it has legs on that aspect. But it feels like it's kind of gotten away from its source material a lot.
Yeah. Well, the 5th book is called The Core. So, yeah,
so
I agree with you. I assume
Arlen's
that the 5th
journey
book
to
is...
the core is in, it's Journey to the Center of the Earth.
And yeah, I'm sure he'll get there, and then it'll turn out there's probably nice demons down there or something, and they're being oppressed, and he'll team up.
Oh, friendly demons. Oh, heart demons. I bet there's a heart demon. I guarantee you. And then all 5 demons combined to Captain Planet Demon. Yeah. So what else should we touch on for this book? It's going to be a bit of a short episode because we only have essentially one half, but yeah.
I quite liked Peter V. Brett's writing style.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was definitely, like, it was an engaging book, and it was well written enough to kind of keep you going with it, for sure. I mean, there were kind of like niggles at it, but
yeah,
I definitely enjoyed the book, and I would probably keep reading the second one. I mean, the Painted Man ends with this like 2-paragraph, basically summary of what's going to happen in the next story. It's very overt in setting up its sequel at the very end. Which is, I don't know, whatever.
I mean, it's almost obligatory in fantasy.
Is it?
Fantasy books always have to have at least 5 in the series now. You can't just write a one-off book.
It like ends with the scene of the other deliverer from Krasia riding across the sand and being like, they used to call me blah, but now they call me the deliverer. And it's like, oh, okay. I see where this is going.
Yeah.
It's the sand people attacking.
And so he's a point of view character in the second book, actually. It's not just the 3 point of view characters from the first one. It's sort of expanding in the second one.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so what would you give it out of 10?
I mean, despite all of my complaints and ideas of how it could be better, I'd still give it an 8.
I think I would give it slightly less than an 8. I think just because I feel like I was a bit more affected by the fantasy trope stuff than you were. So I'd say maybe a 7. Yeah. I'd say 7.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, still pretty good. Good recommendation to us, mysterious benefactor who we shall not name. Yeah, cool. So that wraps up another episode of Media MD. So Elliot, what are we checking out next fortnight?
Next fortnight, we're checking out everything.
So read up on everything and let us know what you thought of everything. Yeah, oh, actually, no, that's going to not work, Elliot, because there's like a video game that came out recently called Everything, and people are going to think we're talking about that.
That's a really bad name for searching on Google and stuff.
Yeah, Elliot was making a goof. Don't worry about... Next week, we're not checking out anything in particular. It's a bit of a special episode. So don't worry, just take 2 weeks off. You don't have to read anything for a while. You can just hit stones with sticks. I don't know what people do for fun, but it's not reading, apparently, for the next 2 weeks. And we'll see you in 2 weeks for our special episode.